My name is Harper Sloan. I'm 41 years old. As a real estate attorney, I once believed I understood the law of life as well as I understood the law itself. Until that night. At the seaside restaurant where my husband once proposed, he showed up, not with flowers but with his young, pregnant secretary. She rested a hand on her belly, smiled, and softly said, "We want to start a new family, in your house." They thought I'd break. They had no idea. I had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Have you ever been betrayed by the one you loved most? In a way so shameless it didn't even feel real? What would you do when the home you built with your own hands becomes a trophy for the other woman? Comment below if you've ever found yourself in a situation like mine. And don't forget to like and subscribe to follow this story to the very end. I met Nathan Sloan when I was 25 at a party celebrating my first big legal win, a land dispute case that lasted 18 months. I was the youngest attorney on the team, yet the one the press mentioned the most. He appeared like a man who had seen it all. Stone-colored linen shirt, whiskey glass resting lightly in his hand, a tilted smile and calculating eyes masked behind polished charm. I remember exactly what he said when he walked over to me. "You didn't just win the case, Harper, you broke through the bias." I found that captivating. A man who could see the invisible battles women like me had to fight to stand where we stood. Things moved quickly after that. Nathan was the one who proposed, the one who encouraged me to quit my old firm to start something of our own, the one who convinced me we should build a beautiful home, as a declaration of the life we were creating together. And I foolishly believed that was love. I spent 2 years searching for the perfect plot along the Santa Barbara coast, a spot with unobstructed views, private enough, far enough from town to feel peaceful but close enough to never feel isolated. I stood under the sun watching every plank of wood, every stone, every roofline take shape. 3 stories, a Tuscany stone facade and floor-to-ceiling glass doors opening wide to the ocean. Everything was under both our names. "Let me save face," Nathan had said with a grin. "A man can't admit he's living off his wife." I signed without hesitation. I loved him. And more than anything, I never imagined I'd one day need to protect myself from that man. At first, the signs of control were subtle. Comments like, "You don't need to wear suits. Makes you seem cold." Or, "Why stay late at the office? People might think I can't provide for you." I brushed them off as care. Until I realized I had slowly started changing. My clothes, my speech, even how I sat at events, all to keep Nathan from feeling overshadowed. One day, I came back from a statewide women's legal summit where my keynote had been published in the industry paper. Nathan didn't congratulate me. Instead, he said, "Do you ever notice the more successful you get, the colder you become toward me?" I stayed silent, not because I felt guilty, but because I didn't know how to answer in a way that wouldn't hurt him, or more accurately, make him feel inferior. I thought I was keeping the peace. But in reality, I was slowly giving up pieces of myself to fit the shadow he wanted me to live in. For the past 6 months, familiar gut feelings started creeping in. Sudden business trips, unanswered messages. Every time I asked, Nathan had a script ready. Urgent call from Seattle. Early flight, the CEO wanted a private meeting. I thought I'd texted you already. I'd heard it enough to memorize the lines. But once, when he claimed to be in New York, his phone showed his location as San Diego. Just over a 2-hour drive from our home. I didn't say anything, I just began to track everything. I also noticed small, steady withdrawals from our secondary account. Strange charges, restaurant reservations at places I'd never been, furniture payments linked to an unfamiliar address. When I asked, he laughed. "Probably entered the wrong card, I'll double-check." But there was never any follow-up. Once I came home early from a meeting in San Jose. The house was dark. I walked in and saw Nathan's gray shirt tossed over the couch, a half-finished glass of wine on the bar, but what made me freeze was the emerald necklace, resting crooked on the armchair. It wasn't mine. I don't wear jewelry like that, I never have. I didn't move, didn't speak. I let my eyes do what my voice never could. See the truth without denial. As if one part of me had always known. The rest was simply waiting for confirmation. I used to think I was strong, rational, sharp enough to never fall into the traps that so many accomplished women had. Yet it still took me nearly a year to gather the courage to call Monica Pierce. Her name was whispered among in-house legal circles like a precious secret. A former FBI agent who could dig up financial trails and hidden relationships without leaving a trace. No website, no public address, one phone number, and a line that said it all. I don't help you forgive, I help you know. Our first meeting took place at an old bookstore in Pasadena. My palms were damp, as if I were the one hiding something. Monica sat in the back, a beam of sunlight slicing across the black file in front of her. Harper Sloan? Her voice was low, crisp, without a trace of pity. I need to know everything. She didn't ask what I already suspected or how much I knew. She opened her laptop, asked for Nathan's date of birth, social security number, and a few joint bank accounts we used. Then she said, "Give me 3 days, I'll send you the first file." 3 days later, I received an email. No subject, no greeting, just one line. Open when alone. I locked my office door, pulled the blinds, silenced my phone, and clicked the attachment. Screenshots of interbank transfers. A steady flow of funds from Nathan's account to an entity called Greywater Solutions Ltd. Based in the Cayman Islands. The recipient, Maya Quinn. I had never heard that name, but a few lines later, Monica's note made my blood run cold. Maya Quinn, legal name of Avery Quinn before her name change in 2019. Record of academic withdrawal from a community college, former bartender at Club Knox. Club Knox. I remembered Nathan's recurring investor meetings every Thursday night during our first year in Santa Barbara. Thursday, the same night Knox held its VIP cocktail events. Back then, I didn't think much of it. Now, it couldn't be clearer. Monica included a video clip from the club's exterior security camera, pulled through a retired guard she'd rehired to access old footage. The scene was hazy under neon lights. I saw Avery, or Maya, arguing with a red-hammed woman. Their body language was tense, the audio garbled. The video cut off just as the redhead was pulled toward the parking lot. Monica's note read, "This woman, name Lauren Field, went missing 2 weeks later. Still not found. No official conclusion." I shut the screen and leaned back in my chair. My chest felt like it had been filled with cement, not from jealousy, but from something colder, deeper. The realization that I had let someone like him move freely through my life. I called Monica back immediately. "I want to know more about whoever's behind the money transfers and about Nathan and Maya. How long, when it started, how often they were together." "I'll need full access," Monica said plainly. "Phone, email, cloud storage accounts if you're logged in." I sent her everything, including the list of passwords Nathan had stored in a secure app which I had quietly copied last year. He replied with a single message. "You did the right thing coming early. Most people don't even know where to start, but you've already started." I didn't respond. I simply opened the safe and pulled out the house deed. After many sleepless nights, I had decided to transfer ownership of the mansion into a newly formed LLC called Halstead Holdings, jointly held by me and a distant cousin in Nevada. It was legal, discreet, and entirely within the gray zone of personal property law. If a lawsuit ever came, Nathan would have to prove the house still counted as marital property. And he'd lose. I also began collecting every small detail: receipts for unusual gifts, odd meeting schedules, personal emails from his secondary account, screenshots from the shared family iPad that Nathan forgot to log out of. Each detail was a puzzle piece, and I was quietly reconstructing a picture he didn't even know was being redrawn. At dinner, I still smiled and served Nathan extra salad. He still held me in his sleep, still sent sweet messages on business trips. But I was no longer the blindly devoted wife. I was watching and waiting for the right moment. Monica was right. Forgiveness is a choice. But knowing the truth? That's a responsibility. And I was carrying out that responsibility, one step at a time. I didn't tell anyone about this, except for Cecilia Booth. We met back in college. I studied law, she studied psychology. While I spent my time in libraries and debate halls, Cecilia would read Freud in the park and sketch strange spirals on the covers of her notebooks. She was the only person patient enough to sit in silence with me, and the first to notice something was wrong, even before I admitted it to myself. One Friday evening I called her. "I need to talk." She paused for a moment. "Lawyer needs a doctor?" 10 minutes later, we sat in her office, a small room on the third floor of a red brick building in Westwood, where the scent of peppermint oil and cedarwood blended like a quiet invitation to speak. Cecilia didn't ask if I wanted tea, didn't ask if I was sure I wanted to start. She sat, crossed her legs, and looked me straight in the eyes. "Since when?" she asked gently. "Since I started fearing the way my eyes looked back at me in the mirror each morning." I told her everything. About Nathan, about Avery, about Monica and the clip from Club Knox. About the bank accounts, about the LLC I had created in secret. About how I'd been collecting evidence like a prosecutor inside my own marriage. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said one thing. "Harper, I have to ask you something, and I mean it sincerely. Are you doing this because you want to win, or because you want to destroy? You know I'm not the kind who obsesses over revenge. No, but you are the kind who can get swept away by the feeling of betrayal." She didn't say it to attack me, she said it to make me step back and look at myself. "I don't want to hurt anyone," I began. "But you're willing to go as far as it takes to protect what you believe is justice?" "I get that, but Harper, you need to be very clear about this. Strategy is action with intention. Hatred is action without control. If you choose strategy, keep your head cool. If you choose hatred, you'll burn yourself long before you scorch anyone else." I exhaled. My throat burned in a way I hadn't felt in years. "Strategy," I said. "It's strategy." She nodded as if silently approving, then added, "Then don't celebrate when you get another piece. Celebrate when that piece forces them to show their hand." The next day I asked Monica to expand the scope of surveillance, not just on Avery, but also on her mother, Judith Quinn. Judith had once been an elementary school teacher in Ohio, widowed in 2012. Everything about her seemed ordinary. Until 3 months ago, when she suddenly moved into a luxury beachfront apartment in Naples, Florida. The down payment was over $150,000, paid in full within 3 days. Monica sent me drone photos, an apartment with a balcony facing the ocean, a brand new BMW X5 parked in front, and a list of deliveries including Versace, Michael Kors, and Cartier items, all shipped via Amazon Prime to the unit. The recipient's name, Judith Parker, a new last name. Attached to the photos, Monica had written, "I found a name change record from 18 months ago, possibly to erase a past?" It took me a second to process, but inside the pieces began falling into place. Nathan was transferring money to a shell company. That company funded Maya Quinn. Maya changed her name to Avery. Her mother changed hers too. And now they lived like people funded by money no one dared to question. That night I came home late. Nathan was asleep. The lights in the room were off, and streetlights cast liquid shadows across the ceiling. I stood for a long time at the bedroom door, quietly watching him sleep. The man who once made me believe I would never be abandoned. Now all I saw was a distance between us that couldn't be measured in square feet or years, but in broken trust and the hollow shell of a marriage gone ice cold. I walked back to my office, opened my laptop, and created a new folder. I labeled it Judith/Florida. And I began documenting more, not to destroy anyone, but so that if they collapsed on their own, I would have the truth in hand. One Monday morning, while reviewing project files at the office, I received an express envelope from the law firm Hawthorne & Birch. Inside was a divorce petition signed by Nathan Sloan. Reason? Prolonged emotional abuse causing adverse effects on mental and emotional health. I set the file down, sat up straight, and reread every line. Not a single word of it was true, but I understood immediately. They had decided to make the first move, and they believed I would react impulsively, angrily, defensively, losing control of the very game I had been preparing for months. I didn't do that. I flipped to the last page to check who his legal representative was. Ben Hawthorne. I let out a quiet laugh. Ben had once been the teaching assistant in my property law class during junior year. Smart, sharp, but always so cautious he seemed timid. We'd had a few heated debates in class. I remembered him saying once, "Harper, you're talented, but sometimes being too good makes people want to challenge you." Now Ben was representing my husband, and I saw the tactic for what it was: psychological warfare. Use a familiar face, wrap it in moral language, and try to throw me off balance. But they forgot something. I was no longer that wide-eyed student sitting in the front row. That day, I didn't respond to the petition. I simply texted Monica. "They made the first move. I need the latest update. And I want to recheck the account under Judith's name." She replied 3 minutes later. "Tracking the money flow. There's something you need to see." 2 days later, at a small cafe in Silver Lake, Monica placed a thin file stamped "Private Client" in front of me. "This is access data from your company's internal system, through Avery's email address." She pulled out a printed login history from the company's secure internal database, complete with timestamps. She copied several documents to a USB drive, including the land valuation plan for the Redbrook project you're currently negotiating. Monica looked at me, her tone serious. "She's not just your husband's pregnant mistress. She's a pawn being used to extract financial data. In real estate, unpublished land valuation plans are as good as gold. If Nathan was preparing to exit the marriage by building a case for emotional abuse, and Avery was playing the role of the emotionally wounded expectant mother, then the rest of the plan might be to use that data for profit. Or leverage." I lifted my coffee cup, hands steady. "They think I'll back down. They think I'm weak." Monica smirked. "But they don't know what you keep in your safe." That night, I waited until Nathan was asleep. I opened the safe beneath the stairs, the one where I kept original contracts no one touched but me and my private attorney. I pulled out a slim file, Avery Quinn's employment contract. The original, signed by both her and me, dated the day she officially became a probationary employee at my firm's investment branch a year and a half ago. I flipped to page 7, clause 6.2. Ethics and confidentiality. Employee agrees not to engage in any personal relationship with senior financial partners or their direct relatives who have access to sensitive financial data. Violation of this clause will result in immediate termination and potential civil liability. The signature, Avery M. Quinn, was clear. I didn't draft that clause to stop her from falling in love. I wrote it to protect assets. A few days later, at the first preliminary mediation session at their law firm, I entered with a calm face. Nathan wore a gray suit, Avery a pale maternity dress, eyes fake puffy with tears. He got to his feet and extended a hand with professional calm. "Harper, I'm sorry we're meeting again under these circumstances." "I'm not," I said gently, then turned to him. "Before we begin, I have a formal request. A DNA test." Avery visibly froze. Ben leaned in and whispered something to her. Nathan frowned. "Harper," Nathan said quietly, "this isn't necessary. You're being—" "No, I'm following procedure," I cut him off. "We can't divide assets for a child if we're not certain who the father is." Ben tried to keep his composure. "We believe such a request could be emotionally distressing to my client, especially during pregnancy." I smiled. "Then she may decline. But I'll be submitting this employment contract to the court. The ethics clause violation is clear, and its consequences, I'm afraid, extend beyond losing her job." The room fell silent. Avery looked at Nathan, as if wanting to say something, but her lips pressed shut just as Ben interjected. "We'll need time to review the material you've presented." I got to my feet and reached for the file. "Take your time." I prepared the court version. "But if you'd prefer to handle this internally first, I'm happy to let you—" I knew they wouldn't stop over one contract, so I didn't stop over one mediation. Over the next 2 weeks, Monica and I worked nearly around the clock. She combed through every financial link, every line in the bank statements, every transaction just under $10,000, split deliberately. A familiar pattern of someone avoiding federal monitoring. Then one rainy Wednesday afternoon, Monica stepped into my office, placing a USB drive and 2 printed pages on my desk. You asked for the ultimate weapon. I brought you the full arsenal. I plugged in the USB. The screen loaded a clipped voice recording from a voicemail thread. Avery's voice. High-pitched, slightly sharp and unmistakably irritated. I don't know, okay? The baby could be Nathan's, or Zach's. I'm not a scientist. Who's Zach? I asked, eyes still on the screen. Monica slid over the second page. Zachary Moore, owner of Equinox Strategies LLC based in Arizona, recipient of $642,000 in transfers from the offshore account Nathan's been funneling money into for the past 9 months. I looked up, unblinking. Zach's her ex? Not just an ex, Monica replied. He was convicted of fraud in 2018, money laundering through real estate. Avery's name came up as a potential witness, but she never testified. It all began unfolding like a chessboard where I once played silent pawn, now turned lead strategist. I forwarded the audio file and financial report to my private attorney, the kind who never speaks to the press, hates publicity, but knows how to make people back off when faced with irrefutable evidence. A few days later, I got a call from Monica after 10 p.m. Are you still awake? Yes. I think you need to see this. She sent a link. An old surveillance video, recovered by a forensic technician she had privately hired. The timestamp read, June 14th, 5 years ago. Location, the back alley of Club Knox, where Avery once bartended. I played the video. Avery, blonde hair tied high, stood near a large trash bin. She was shouting at a young girl. Dark-haired, petite, maybe a customer or coworker. The audio was distorted, but the body language was hostile. Avery pointing directly at her face, shoving her slightly in the chest, then jabbing a finger toward the parking lot. Seconds later, the girl turned and ran. Avery hurled something after her. The screen shook slightly. Monica's message read. The girl's name was Lindsay Brooke, reported missing 3 days later. Case remains unsolved. No one ever mentioned Avery was the last to see her. I sat frozen. This wasn't infidelity. It was a blueprint of manipulation layered over money and control. This was a pattern of escalating behavior. My husband funneling illegal funds, Avery using personal relationships to access assets, and possibly, a connection to an unresolved criminal case. Before the first hearing, my attorney submitted a motion requesting the court reclassify the case from civil to civil with potential criminal implications, based on the financial evidence and both defendants' links to an individual previously investigated by federal authorities. Nathan's side responded with silence. I knew what that meant. They were no longer in control. They were scrambling, trying to manage the fallout, and in the legal world, silence is the most elegant confession there is. I didn't say a word about the video, hadn't released the audio recording, and hadn't submitted the financial records to the court yet. I simply had my attorney send a formal warning. We are in possession of material that can be submitted to the U.S. Attorney's Office if necessary. And privately, I had already drafted 2 scenarios. 1. They seek settlement, relinquish all claims to the assets, and quietly withdraw from the dispute to avoid further investigation. 2. They dig in and prolong the lawsuit. At which point, I would let the jury hear the recording, review the financial report, and watch the unreleased video. Either way, I was ready. The courtroom was oddly cold that day, despite the temperature outside reaching over 80 degrees Fahrenheit. I sat at the plaintiff's table, eyes fixed on Nathan as he stepped up to the witness stand, visibly uneasy in a way I had never seen before. His suit, likely pressed earlier that morning, now showed light creases at the shoulders and cuffs. The collar of his shirt hung slightly open, as if he were trying to breathe more deeply than usual. My attorney, Mr. Marshall, stood, adjusted his glasses, and began. Mr. Sloan, can you explain why, over the past 9 months, you transferred a total of $642,000 into the account of Equinox Strategies LLC? Nathan licked his lips, glanced at Avery, then said, That was a personal investment, a way of supporting an old friend. And who is this old friend? Marshall asked, not giving him time to blink. Zachary Moore. We went to college together. Marshall nodded slightly. But the financial records also show that Avery Quinn, who is currently pregnant and living with you, has a personal connection to Mr. Moore as well, correct? The air in the courtroom tightened, like someone had turned a pressure valve. Nathan stammered. "I'm not sure if they're still in contact." For the first time, Judge Emerson looked up and met the defendant's eyes. She tapped her pen lightly against the bench. "Mr. Sloan, if you're unable to provide a clear answer, the court will consider full access to bank records and digital correspondence to clarify the nature of the relationships involved." Then it was Avery's turn. She wore a pale blue dress and flats, hands protectively resting on her stomach as though it were some halo that needed guarding. But when Marshall presented the court with a request for a paternity test, her demeanor shifted. "I don't think that's necessary," Avery said, her voice shaking. "It would cause stress for me and the baby." Judge Emerson gave a slight nod. "Ms. Quinn, the court respects the right to safeguard your health, but when assets and legal entitlements involving the child are being used as part of the case, establishing paternity is not optional." Avery turned to Nathan, but this time he didn't meet her gaze. He stared down at the floor, silent. Marshall raised a hand calmly. "Furthermore, the court may consider an audio recording between Ms. Quinn and a third party, in which she states explicitly that she is unsure who the father is." On the opposing side, Attorney Ben Hawthorne closed his eyes briefly, like a man who had already seen the board collapse, and his last pawn standing alone. During the recess, I stood alone in the courthouse hallway, holding a lukewarm coffee. Ben approached, his expression heavy. "Harper, I need to speak with you privately." I led him to a quieter corridor. "I'm withdrawing from the case," he said without delay. "Nathan hasn't told me the whole truth, and I won't represent a client I can no longer trust." I looked at him for a moment, then asked gently, "How much of what I presented did Nathan never mention to you?" Ben inhaled slowly. "Almost all of it. I didn't know about the transfers, didn't know about the offshore company, certainly didn't know she was linked to an old missing persons case. I'm a lawyer, not someone who covers up evidence. Thank you for stepping back when it mattered." Ben turned to leave, but before he exited the hall he paused. "Harper, I know you probably don't need to hear this, but back in the day I really admired you. Now I admire you even more." When the session resumed, the judge acknowledged Hawthorne's withdrawal and granted a one-day postponement for the defense to appoint a new attorney. But even in that moment, I wasn't focused on who the next lawyer might be. I was focused on Nathan's vacant stare. The look of a man who knew the wall had cracked, and that behind it was a truth too heavy to stop. That morning I was working in my office when the phone rang. Monica, she never called unless it was urgent. I picked up. "There's a name you need to remember," Monica said, voice dropping. "Chase Donnelly." "Avery's ex?" "Exactly. He contacted me after seeing the trial mentioned on an old legal forum. Chase didn't expect things to go this far, and yesterday he agreed to cooperate with my independent investigator." I leaned back in my chair, exhaled. "What did he say?" His exact words were, "I once loved Avery like a fool, but she never loved me. She always said, if you want out of poverty you have to get pregnant by someone rich. Having a baby was her leverage." I clenched my hand, not out of jealousy but pure revulsion. Did Chase know about Nathan? He did. Avery told him Nathan was a stable candidate, clean reputation, clear assets. She had even prepped a file on him, his investment history, every business affiliate. Harper, this wasn't emotional. This was a blueprint. A bitter chill crept through me, the realization that I had once been part of someone's strategy, and never even knew it. That afternoon I received an email from my assistant. "A woman named Veronica Quinn wants to meet. Says she's Avery Quinn's mother." I reread the name, then agreed. The meeting was set at a small cafe in Lincoln Park. I picked a table by the window. Veronica arrived 10 minutes late, thin, wearing a gray silk dress, dark sunglasses still on. She took her seat, sunglasses still on, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. I won't waste your time." She pulled a thick envelope from her handbag. "These are all the documents related to the Florida apartment. I've signed them and clearly stated that the money came from my daughter, Avery. If necessary, I will testify that the apartment was a conditional gift from Nathan Sloan. Why are you doing this? She removed her sunglasses. Her eyes were slightly swollen, dark circles revealing sleepless nights. Because I know my daughter isn't innocent, but I also don't want her to drown, if there's a chance for her to make things right. I frowned slightly. So this is redemption? No, she looked straight at me. This is to keep her from facing the ending I once watched unfold with my own mother. I stayed silent out of loyalty. And that silence destroyed my entire family. I stayed quiet for a moment, then reached out and accepted the envelope. Thank you for not choosing silence again. What happened to you wasn't part of my plan. But I didn't stop it. I watched her figure disappear through the cafe window. No goodbyes were exchanged. A few days later, the court issued a temporary freeze on all disputed assets, including the mansion, 2 bank accounts, and the investments in the shell company Equinox. Federal financial oversight agencies also began reviewing the money flow between Nathan, the offshore entity, and Zachary Moore's account. Nathan and Avery were no longer seen together. Nathan's new lawyer, a woman in her 50s, refused to make statements in court and continuously requested delays for upcoming hearings. But I recognized the signs. They were signs of a fracture that couldn't be repaired. The paternity test results arrived exactly 1 week after Avery moved out of the apartment in Evanston, a sealed envelope stamped with the red seal of the court. I opened it while standing in the kitchen, my hands still dusted with breadcrumbs I hadn't rinsed off. The DNA didn't match. Nathan was not the father. I eased into the chair, drying my hands on the linen towel my mother once sent from Maine. Soft, worn, familiar. Then I called my attorney. I want to settle, clean, final. Nathan didn't show up. His lawyer signed on his behalf. He no longer wore the smug expression I saw on his face during our first mediation. After losing his investment role on the Northwest Regional Projects Board due to pending investigations on illicit transfers, Nathan was left with little ground to stand on. I didn't drag things out. I offered for him to fully withdraw from the LLC, the one that held the mansion title, and in return, I'd issue a one-time payout. Enough for him to leave Chicago and start over if he chose to. His lawyer nodded. No negotiation. Everything concluded in under 40 minutes. 3 weeks later, I received an email from the real estate brokerage. The mansion had sold successfully for $5.1 million. Above asking price. The buyers were a couple from Seattle who loved the wooden arched roof and koi pond I had insisted on building in the backyard. I never returned to that house. The keys were mailed. I didn't want to stand in front of it one last time. Didn't want to touch the cold porch where I once waited for Nathan through 3 winters. Instead, I packed my bags and drove away. I chose Vermont, a small town near Lake Willoughby where the maple leaves seemed to sing their own song of rebirth. The house I bought was a small white cabin, 2 bedrooms, a modest porch, and an old gas stove. No electric fireplace, but a red brick wood-burning one I fell in love with at first sight. The first neighbor I met was Mrs. Mildred, a widow in her 70s who loved making blueberry jam. She gave me her first jar after seeing me struggle with the garden hose. Everyone here has a past, Miss Harper. The only difference is who chooses to carry it and who chooses to leave it on the path behind. I gave her a gentle smile, thanked her. No explanation, no stories. Vermont didn't need to know who I used to be in Chicago. Some mornings, I wake at 4 a.m., brew black tea and sit on the front porch. The lake at dawn is always covered in a soft mist, like a quiet veil laid over memory. I relearned how to make the cinnamon waffles I gave up during 8 years of marriage because Nathan never liked the smell. The wood stove fills the cabin with a gentle warmth, of cinnamon, of oak, of freedom. Monica still calls occasionally. Cecilia sends books, the latest on cognitive behavioral therapy and Italian psychology journals I can't even read. And I haven't changed my number. Nathan could text, he hasn't. Avery left no trace. One Sunday afternoon in March, as the snow melted and the scent of damp soil crept through the windows, I hung a small sign in front of the lake house. A gathering for women who have walked through unfair divorces. No names, no sign-ups. Just come, if your heart needs a quiet place. 6 women came, no one looked alike. One wore a tailored blazer, another an old hoodie with coffee stains on the cuffs. We sat around the maplewood table I found at a second-hand shop. I served soft hand-kneaded bread I had baked myself. No one shared heartbreaks in the first few minutes. It wasn't until the second kettle of tea was gone that a woman named Judith spoke quietly. I used to think, if I had been a little kinder, maybe he wouldn't have cheated. I poured her more tea, resting my hand gently on her elbow. They don't leave because we're cruel. They leave because they chose to walk away before they had the courage to face the truth. That they weren't worthy of the kindness we gave. Judith didn't cry, but she stayed behind to help wash the dishes longer than anyone else. That night, as I washed the last glass cup, Cecilia called. "How's everyone holding up?" "Good. No one broke further, no one's fully healed." But we sat together without armor. Silence. Then her voice, soft. "What do you live for now, Harper?" "Not for revenge," said he, "but because I no longer need to defend. I live not to resist anyone. I live so I no longer have to shrink in the home I built with my own hands." The next morning, I found a small envelope in my mailbox. No return address, no sender. Only a postcard and the silence it carried. A photo of a quiet beach, white sand, gray sky, a blurred figure in the distance. I flipped it over. Slanted handwriting, steady but slightly trembling. "You never screamed, that was the scariest part." I stood quietly on the porch, holding the card. Heart as still as the lake before a breeze. No signature, no date, no hint of who sent it. But I knew. The message wasn't meaningless. Was it Nathan? Was it Avery? Or someone else entirely? Someone who had watched from the sidelines, witnessed a war they neither won nor lost? I wasn't sure, and strangely I didn't need to know anymore. Because of all the things I had ever lost, there was one thing I finally reclaimed. Something no one could return to me or steal again. It was silence, yes, but not emptiness. It was made of strength, rooted in peace and held steady by the life I rebuilt. What do you think that postcard meant? Was it a belated warning? A quiet sigh from someone realizing it was too late? Or the final period at the end of a story once believed never to close? I may never know who sent it, but I know this. My silence is no longer surrender. It's a refusal to re-enter a game I've already walked away from. And you, if it were you, would you need an answer? Would you keep that card as a keepsake? Or toss it into the fire with all the things that no longer belong? Share your thoughts below. I want to hear from you. Those who have chosen quiet to move forward, paused at the edge of a cliff, or learned how to stand again in a house that once felt like home. And if you see yourself in this story, don't forget to follow the channel. Because the stories we share here aren't only memories. They're bridges toward healing. Stories about family, love, betrayal, and the quiet courage of those who once believed they had nothing left to protect. See you in the next story. Maybe next time, it'll be yours.
I hope you enjoyed this thrilling journey. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? Let me know in the comments below. Your feedback inspires more epic tales.